5:32 on a beautiful summer afternoon, so we'll go faster, hopefully. Call the meeting to order at 5:32 p.m. Public comment. Raquel, do we have any public with the hand raised?
We have Phil Piscatelli, but I believe he's from Colliers and he'll just be listening in.
I assume you can confirm that, Adam?
Confirmed.
Got it. Item number 3, approval of prior minutes of April 15th, 2024. It's hard to believe it's been that long since we all gathered. So would anyone like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make that motion.
That's what I know. It's been a while. People probably don't remember seeing the minutes, but we'll vouch for it. Would we have a second?
I'll second it.
Got it. Thanks, Bob. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Sharon's up. I think that's unanimous. Got a few late joining, but I think we have a quorum to approve those. Moving on to old business, new business, architect's report. So Justin, if you want to go ahead and kick us off.
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Justin Hopkins, Tecton Architects. We got Jeff Wazinski also here on the call. So we're fully into the construction administration mode here. So with that, we're issuing weekly reports. And I believe there's a handful of those reports that are a part of your packet tonight. So I'll go over the most recent one. What we try and do in each report is summarize, the RFIs that we've received this week. So we'll have the current RFI received and then total. So in the last 7 days from our last report, we've received 10 construction RFIs for a total of 54. We received 3 submittals for a total of 100. So that really tells you, the bulk of the work that Gilbane and the subcontractors have been doing, really getting a lot of these submittals to the design team. We have received a few PCOs that are related that will be part of the conversation a little bit later, but reflect some of the scope capture from bidding as well as some field conditions. We do have applications for payment, both I think O1 is awaiting SBC approval. We also have O2 that's under review. In the last week, we held 4 meetings. So we're meeting weekly on site with Gilbane, Colliers, and any sub-consultants as necessary, as well as the town of Madison. Peter and his team are there. We're holding weekly building information modeling coordination meetings with Gilbane, the subcontractors, and the sub-consultants. And we're also having pre-construction meetings and ad hoc meetings to address field issues as they come up, kind of ad hoc. We have a weekly site visit that we included some photographs from last week. We also issued 3 bulletins last week. So bulletins are the communication device contractually that goes from the design team to the construction manager, and those take 3 forms: supplemental instructions, or basically clarifications to the documents. That's form 1. Form 2 are a proposal request, so items that may change scope, time, or cost, that goes under what's called a PR, proposal request. And the third is a construction change directive, which is in the event of a tracking mechanism for additional work. A lot of times this happens in site work. We will issue a CCD in order to allow the work to continue. So those are the 3 contractual mechanisms that Gilbane's contract gets modified by our AIA contract language. Those are the 3 ways that we issue changes or clarifications to the contract documents. So with that, we issued 3 last week. 2 were related to, one was related to an ongoing conversation with the district regarding some toilet fixture height revisions in our pre-kindergarten areas. One was the result of coordination with Eversource related to the transformer location. And the third was a construction change directive for disposal of on-site soil. So I'm sure we'll get into that in some of the further discussion. Other than that, the report is pretty self-explanatory, but I guess this is an appropriate time for me to ask the committee, does this format of communication, does this work in terms of your ability to understand what's going on in the field, in concert with Collier's updates and Gilbane's updates as well? Is there anything that you would like us to change from a reporting mechanism? I'll take the silence as a general agreement and add simply that in our forecast, we're going to be looking to schedule a kickoff meeting for the furniture, fixtures, and equipment and technology conversations. Those likely, I circulated some potential weeks to Adam to then coordinate with the district. We would likely be doing that once school gets out. In terms of starting that kickoff. Now that is a 4 to 5 month process where we'll kick off, we'll have a couple of iterations of design and budgeting for FF&E and technology. Ultimately, we want to target going to the state for the whole nother round of the pre-bid conformance review for FF&E, technology, and playscapes. So we will be going through a number of presentations as we get closer to that end. So we have a little bit of work in front of us for that, but by the very nature of when we want to be purchasing this equipment, it's the right time of the schedule to be starting those conversations. So more to come later, but I just want to let you know that is going to be upcoming. And with that, I don't think I have anything further. Thanks. I hope I wasn't on mute that whole time.
No, that was good. Sorry, I love something.
Okay.
The new Teams or Zoom popped up on my screen. Great job. Jeff, do you want to add anything to that?
No.
Got it.
Justin summarized it well. Thanks.
Beautiful. Moving on to the second part, item number 4, construction managers. So, Nick, you want to take the lead? Robert, who's doing the heavy lift here? Robert?
Yeah, I'll do what I do best. Well, probably not best, but not well anyway. It's delegated to Robert. So go ahead.
Thank you. So just on a high level, since our last building committee meeting, we did bring on another team member. So just looking at our current staff for the project, we have a total of 4 Gilbane members on site daily. We have Vinny Lynch, our super, who's been kind of working on the coordination of the concrete and the site work that's continuing on a daily basis. But he's also been kind of looking ahead and starting to plan out some of the steel work and some of the upcoming work we have in May, such as the geothermal wells that will start by the end of this week. And then he's also even planning about starting to look at and think about the next round of trades with like the masons kind of starting down the road in the underground, plumbing for the footings and in the footprint of the building as well. So Vinny's been busy. We have 2 Gilbane project engineers who, as Justin kind of stole their thunder, but what they're basically working on is all those submittals, the initial reviews prior to them coming over to Tecton. But so they've been chasing priority submittals, making sure we're getting the right information in and getting the right approvals kind of in place and packaged up and over to Tecton and their team with Cole Ronan. So they're heavy into the submittal process at this point with all the trades on board, except for general welding, which is the 05B package that Adam will talk about. And we're looking for approval on today. And then also our project engineers are reviewing and sending out those bulletins that Justin also mentioned, making sure that we're getting the pricing in a timely manner. Comparing those pricing to our internal estimates and making sure the scope's complete, and then packaging them up into those ATPs that Adam will also talk about later. So that's a lot of the legwork that our two project engineers, Brandon and Steve, are working on. And then for the more exciting items, I'll share my screen here quickly. Hopefully, can everyone see this? Hang on,
Oh,
sorry.
yeah. No, there you go.
Nah.
It's coming.
Can you see it now?
Perfect.
Should be a I'm on the right here. Hang on. Whoop. Shared the wrong one, but so what we're looking at here is the overall foundation plan. This
Rob, I think
Yep.
you were
You had it
sharing
the first
the right
time.
one originally.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right, sorry.
There
The
you go.
Teams, the Zoom snafu a little bit because it actually has the information on a different screen. But so what you see here in yellow is that 7-line retaining wall, and then looking at the picture, this big area of construction right here is that 7-line wall. This in a little section of wall behind it is what we're actually going to place tomorrow. So this is that big first major milestone of getting that retaining wall in. From there, we're going to continue a little bit to this direction and this direction with a couple other sections of walls just to help us with some site prep. But the majority of work transitioning next week will be the lower area B foundation footings and walls, which if I zoom out is this area here. And just for reference, so Daniel Hand High School would be over here. Mungertown Road would be to the left of the screen. So concrete work is on schedule and progressing nicely. And we're really looking to hammer out that area, be that lower area with the foundations over the next couple weeks. This item here will just kind of give you a general overview of what the site looks like. So I tried to put the pictures in kind of the orientation of where you're standing. So Mungertown Road again is over on the left side. This would be standing when you first pull in the site. And what I was trying to highlight here is we've done a decent amount of the fill required for the upper level area A. So as you can see, we're kind of graded out and kind of to a good point where we're probably within 1.5 feet of what the finished floor is. So when we first started on site, this was significantly lower. So it's work over the last 2-3 weeks that's been in progress as we kind of leveled this upper portion of the site in preparation of foundations. This picture here is standing at the top. Basically, I'd be standing right around here, right by the south entrance to the upper level of the school. And so what you can see here is we've kind of also leveled out and prepped the lower area B. So we're kind of have a nice flat working area when we're prepared to kind of continue on with the excavation of lower area B. So we kind of have the site prep ready and we'll now proceed with the footings and foundations. And then lastly, just a little other side note of work going on site. So this picture here shows some of the S&E controls in. There's this stone here is what we use to control the sediment erosion control and the rain on site. This detention basin is basically over in this corner of the site, kind of by the south parking lot. And what we have is another one, which you can't see too well in this picture, but if you zoom in, it gets a little pixely. There's another one that's over in this area. And this is critical because it comes into play with the wells that we're starting. So we've established both S&E ponds, and we're working with the town to make sure that we're satisfying the plans and also making sure that we're satisfying any concerns they have to start that well drilling operation. We had a meeting on site with Coronan engineers, the town building department, and town planning and zoning and wetlands enforcement last week to kind of start going over our proposed schedule for this work and just make sure we're all on the same page as how that work's going to progress. So we're anticipating, based on that meeting, a nice smooth transition into that work. If there's any questions or any revisions that come up as we're working through it, obviously we'll have to put a pin in it and be with the team, but overall the communication has been there to get that off to a smooth and successful start. Stop. Any questions on any of those items?
Looks like you're flying, Robert, on the site.
Yeah, it really looks great.
Thank you. Yeah, and so really for the next month of May, we're going to continue with the foundations, put as much concrete in the ground as we can. As we get into June, we'll start transitioning into potentially some underground work, and then also we'll be preparing for the summer water line work. So, month of May will be kind of status quo, and then June we'll kick off a whole bunch of activities.
Got it. Does anyone have any other questions for Robert or any of the Gilbane team? No questions are good. Okay, moving on to item number 4C, OPM update. Adam, there's a big lift for you here, so you're up.
Most of my talking will be in item 5 and 6, so I'll try to keep this portion of it short. The only thing I would add on to Justin and Rob is there's a lot of additional side coordination that happens beyond just concrete going to steel, going to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for example, geothermal well installs are targeted here in the next I believe it's Wednesday later this week for kickoff. So as part of that, in addition to just the geothermal contractor and Kohler Ronan, et cetera, there's also BVH needs to be involved because they're coming out to do observations and inspections. So it's a lot of the I don't want to call it busy work, but it's these small bullet points here and there that don't just show up on a big photo. When you walk on site and you see concrete, you understand concrete's going on. So that's a lot of what's going on at the OAC meetings and some of that background data on ensuring that kickoff meetings are happening. We're getting everyone involved, all the other sub-consultants, as we get closer towards not only steel going up, but thinking about building envelopes. That'll be another big wave of kickoffs and identifying, additional testing that might want to happen, whether it be fog testing or what have you. So all of these things that get built out, we kind of have to project out, and we get Gilbane to give us their 4-week look ahead, and we look at their overall macro schedule and kind of pick these things out. So that way we start planning for them 2 months in advance, 3 months in advance. And then by the time we get there, it just continues to rock and roll like we're doing now with the concrete. So it's a lot of those things that are worked on between the entire team as we go through each of the weekly meetings. Other than that, I think the bulk, like I said, the bulk of tonight kind of comes up to procurement and invoices, if we want to shift to that, Graham.
Moving on to item number 5. I guess, Adam, you're going to continue on that. Keep going.
So in the committee packet, there were a host of potential change items and invoice packet, but just to kind of start off, because we're transitioning to construction related change orders. We've had some additional services on the design side of things, but now is our first batch of tried and true change orders for construction. So just to give a quick overview of the high level process. As Justin alluded to, there's a couple of mechanisms within the contract for changing scope of work. 2 of them, PRs and purchase or proposal requests and construction change directives, lead to some sort of cost. And so those might be generated by the owner as a request. Hey, we want to do X instead of Y that we originally had. Or that might be a condition that comes up in the field, maybe a discovered condition or something that gets generated through Tecton and the architect and design team, or it could be something that Gilbane encounters. Hey, we opened up this dirt and discovered this condition that's wasn't planned on. We're going to need some additional money to resolve whatever condition. However it gets generated, those get translated into, as I mentioned, either a construction change directive or for this project, you notice some of the files were labeled ATP, authorizations to proceed. By and large, though, it's just change to the contract that requires additional money. And so before any of those become before the SBC, they get developed by Gilbane. Gilbane reviews the subcontractors, proposed scopes of works and costs. It goes through Tecton and Colliers also. We meet about it, we review it. If there's any concerns or issues, we iron it out. So by the time it gets to the school building committee, it's been through the ringer of all the various parts and pieces and Colliers and Tecton and Gilbane. So that way, if we're proposing something, it's not just fly by night. Here's something that the subcontractor said they need additional monies for. And that's true for all the items that are coming up here on the docket tonight. In general, through multiple conversations with First Selectwoman Peggy Lyons, as well as the finance director and the finance department, the school building committee has the authority to approve change orders on the construction side of things. So when we put an ATP, an authorization to proceed, or a construction change directive in front of the committee tonight, when you vote for it, that gives Gilbane the ability to go forth and do the work. And so as just the same thing as we do with the invoice packets, after the meeting, anything that gets approved, I'd send to Graham for signature. Or if there was something that was approved via the expedited committee of Peter and George, same sort of thing, they would, confirm its appropriateness and send it to Graham for signature. And then ultimately the wrap up would be the change order. Everyone who always hears about change orders. That change order would compile a number of ATPs or CCDs, what have you, into one document that then gets formally signed by Peggy and given to Gilbane. But the ATPs and CCDs that you vote on here tonight, that gives Gilbane the direction, yes, you're authorized to go ahead, do the work, and we'll wrap up the change order afterwards. So in your mind, ATP equals change order for all intents and purposes. Any questions on process before I get into just a little bit of preamble on some of the things we're looking on tonight? Okay. So some of the change orders are related to consultants. So Langen has a ad service request, and a few of them for Gilbane are either zero cost change orders. But the bulk of the money that's going to be discussed tonight and several of the ATPs and the loan CCD relate to soils. And I've kind of mentioned this at a couple of past meetings, but now we've got sufficient data, and now is the appropriate time to approve some of the contractual changes, either because the scope is done and we know about it, or because the work is ongoing and the subcontractor is going to want to bill for it in an upcoming pay application, and we need to get them a contractual method to do so. As I mentioned, anything tonight has already gone through the consultants, so none of this is a surprise to the project team. We've been talking about this for weeks, but there's still the reason why it's coming up now versus a month ago is we needed the additional testing data that Langen has been doing. We needed to get through some of the site moving and processing to understand what the overall scope was that needs to be the substance of the change order. So by and large, the soils, ATPs, and CCDs that we'll bring up here momentarily all relate to the soils testing that was done recently as part of the project. So kind of going back before we even started, the Mungertown Road parcel was purchased by the town, and as part of the due diligence process and grant application process, there was soils testing done as part of an environmental site assessment. There were, as probably comes as a shock to nobody, that at a former agricultural apple orchard, there were some pesticides used, but they were all below what we call the residential criteria, the RDEC criteria, where testing showed there were some pesticides, but there was no real concern to exposure. I believe one of the consultants said, "Yeah, you could eat the stuff and it wouldn't matter. But it's technically identified on a laboratory test, so it gets flagged as some criteria, some amount of pesticides are in the soil." And this is very common, happens all the time. The criteria, though, based on state regulation, is if you have some detectable amount of pesticides, even though it's below this RDEC level, you have to keep it on site. And so that was the notion, which the project proceeded. As we went through design and we discovered that we need, there was a desire to put in geothermal wells, the wetlands considerations were fully fleshed out with stormwater. The parking lot areas grew in size to accommodate the clarified amount of staffing. The end result was that we couldn't keep all of the dirt on site. Some of the topsoil needed to be exported. And so since we're removing topsoil from the site, it needs to be tested. That's what the Langen testing proposals that you all have approved, a number of meetings ago. That's what that was for, as part of due diligence. Since some of the topsoil needed to leave the site. Langen did the testing, and unfortunately, a decent chunk of soil needed to leave the site and also needed to go to a regulated facility because it couldn't stay on site and we couldn't just ship it off anywhere. So in that situation, it needs to go to a regulated facility, which comes at a fairly substantial cost, unfortunately. The project team worked with Gilbane, the subcontractor, Langen as the soil management expert, to find ways to mitigate some of that scope. So which soils can we keep on site? One of the change orders was for taking some of the soil that needed to come out right away to not a regulated facility, but a local nursery. So although it was more expensive than just clean topsoil, it was far less expensive than taking it to a regulated facility. So all these sort of ways to save 20,000 here, 50,000 there, we worked through as much as we could to minimize the cost, but the end result is that there were a decent amount of soils that needed to go to a regulated facility or additional scope of works for the subcontractor to facilitate soils testing. The guy out there with the bucket to move around some of the dirt so that Langen could take the samples and take them to the lab, that kind of thing. So all in all, it's something that was caught, thankfully before we were out in the field. And some of that was be able to bake into some of the bidding processes and getting competitively bid unit pricing to minimize costs, things of that nature. But as I mentioned, the past couple meetings, we've kind of seen that there was going to be some additional scope for this soil. We just weren't sure what the extent was, but now we have some inclination of what it's going to be. And in some instances, we know what some of those hard costs are. And now is the appropriate time to bring it up for formal change orders. That spiel being done, is there any questions as to the overall categorization of soils before I start bringing up the individual ATPs?
Seth, you got your hand raised?
Yeah, thank you. Forgive my ignorance here. This is the first big scale construction project I've been involved in. And so I'm going to ask a question that may sound a little elementary, but I guess that's okay because it's an elementary school we're building. Is it common when there's a large expense like this that was somewhat foreseeable, but not necessarily foreseeable to the degree? Is it common to go out for like a second opinion type of, like bring in another soil testing company to just run a test? Because it might be a lot less expensive to run a couple extra tests if we were to find out that, maybe there's not as much pesticide as was asserted. Now, and I don't mean in any way, shape, or form to say that Langen is lying or anything like that. I realize the question is loaded with that, but that's not what I intend. I'm just wondering.
In this particular instance, no, there wouldn't be a reason to go out and get a second opinion. They developed the sampling scheme, and the lab, which is a third-party lab, even from Langen, just spits out the results, and those are what they are. And because it's all dictated via state regulation and statute. So there isn't, if you saw this, you have to do this or you have to do that. There's no, a ton of interpretation in terms of, well, could we, this, that, and the other. The testing showed what it showed, and so we're proceeding accordingly. For this particular instance.
Yeah, and there was an incident in Fairfield a few years ago that became problematic for people. So people are much less likely to try to bend the rules a little bit on some of the stuff. So people are following the rules very explicitly. And I don't know if you're familiar with the story, what happened, but if you Google Town of Fairfield waste management site, you'll see a very ugly tale of unfortunate situations that people, were thinking it was, they felt it was kind of in the gray area. But if you follow the state regulations, there's no gray area, there. So, one of the things I think that I don't know if you specifically mentioned, Adam, that made it even more difficult to balance the site was we're in the floodplain, so we could not put any fill in the floodplain. So, if that wasn't a condition, we could have, in theory, built more mounds and fill and lost some of this fill. But with the need to balance the site, there was just no way to put any fill in the bottom half of the site, which would where you might try to lose more of it. But so you were really up against it. And that was kind of unique, the extent of the floodplain on the back half of the property. So we had to fill some of it in the front half, but we couldn't do anything in the back to balance anything we put in there. So it made it very, very difficult to, build more mounds and lose some of this topsoil. So
Thank you both.
So let me share my screen here and we can start moving through the various documents. And each of these has a corresponding draft motion. So the first one actually is a construction change directive. For those not familiar with the difference between a CCD and the authorization to proceed ATP, a CCD is something that's issued when there's some question or still some remaining unknown about the scope. So for example, in this particular instance, the CCD is for a value not to exceed 600,000, established using established unit pricing and quantities submitted to Tecton and Colliers for review. The notion for a CCD, why one would do it is Gilbane and their subcontractor, at this point, they had been moving and not delaying schedule, which has been excellent, but they need some formal documentation to ensure that when they do the work in accordance with this CCD, that they'll be paid for it accordingly. So there's not a question about whether or not this work has to happen. We all agree on the unit costs that'll be applicable. It's just a function of they're actively moving dirt now, and they won't finish before they need to submit a sizable amount of money in a pay application, and they don't want to carry the risk for forever. So this construction change directive basically again authorizes them to proceed. It's a notion that there'll be acknowledgement of the additional work, and then they can get paid for it without having to wait towards the end of a maybe $400,000 or $500,000 cost, and then find out there's a concern or a question or a debate, or they've waited for 2 months on a sizable chunk of money. And they have their own bills to pay. So that difference from an ATP, which is a set scope of work, this is the cost, signed, sealed, done. A CCD will often turn into a final ATP for wrap up once we know what the final scope is. But along the way, their billing can occur, and there's no additional undue risk put on the contracting team. So to that point, the CCD, this is the big one, so to speak, of what we're looking at tonight. And that's for an amount not to exceed $600,000. And this is for that cost to go to that facility. So we did get competitively bid unit pricing on this amongst the various bidders when they came in before we signed GMP. But that's what the CCD is tracking. So that way, when that amount of soil goes off site, Gilbane and subcontractors can bill for it. Any questions on the CCD? Graham, do you want to take these one by one, or do you want me to run through all of them and then go do motions at the end?
Maybe run through them all and then we'll do them all.
Sure. The second item is ATP 1. So again, this is a clean wrapped up amount of scope. This is for taking approximately 500 yards of the soil that was in question to Shoreline Nursery. This soil needed to come off site basically right away, so Gilbane and the subcontractors could work on that big foundation wall that you now saw in photos is up and running. So rather than have this soil go to a regulated facility at $100 a yard or whatever it is. Instead, it was able to go to Shoreline at $30 a yard. So there's a decent chunk of savings there by being able to reach out to some of our industry contacts and find a location that was good synergy where this nursery could take the soil. They don't have issues with the amount of pesticides in it because it's a nursery, and it was something that was permissible through the state regulations based on our Langen consultants and their documentation. So the net sum here is an increase of 5,300, but sort of the asterisk you don't see here is if this had to go to a facility, it might be 30 or 40,000 or something like that. So there was a good opportunity for savings, even though we're looking at an added cost here. Any questions on ATP 1 before I move to the next one? ATP 2 is for 60,000. This one actually doesn't have to do with soils. This one is the, I think someone alluded to it earlier, our miscellaneous metals package. So if you recall, when we signed GMP, all of the trade packages were bid out and we had really good turnout. The only sort of asterisk to that would be the 05 bid miscellaneous metals package, where all three bidders were relying on or needed to fully form their bid some information from one of the manufacturers that just didn't come in time. And so all three withdrew their bids. So we went back out to bid. That gave them enough time to get their information. They resubmitted bids. We went through the scope review process with with the lowest apparent bidder, and the final value for that lowest apparent bidder was 60,000 more than the allowance that we thought it was going to be when we signed GMP. So the delta is what this change order is for. So you notice the motion for this one's a little longer because it's both it's an authorization to use the allowance of 420,000 to increase the amount by 60,000 to cover the extra, and similar to what was done before, authorize Gilbane to enter into the contract with General Welding and Fabrication as part of that rebid process. So that's why that one's a bigger number, because it's for a whole scope of work that was still unresolved when we got to the GMP. Any questions on that one? No. ATP 5 for just over 6,000. This is for the site contractor doing some of the field work to assist with some of the sampling. So Langen went out there, they grabbed the soil samples, coordinated with the laboratory, sent them over, did all the chain of custody, that kind of thing. But someone needed to work the excavator to actually dig the pits and get the soil samples ready, and delineate some of the areas on site between, this soil didn't have any detected pesticides, this one had this level of pesticides, etc. So this 6,000 covers that additional work that the contractor helped us with. And then I'll move on to the last ATP. This one is for a lovely $0. It's for that third mechanism that Justin mentioned earlier in ASI. So it does change the design. And this particular ASI, I think it's for footing drainage or something like that. Is that right? Rob or Nick or Justin, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is changing the design. So we're documenting it as a change order, but there's no cost. It's just changing where the pipes slightly are routed, and there's not additional materials or things of that nature. So I suspect there's probably not a grave opposition to this one at $0, but that's why you're seeing it here, because it does document that formal change. And then the last procurement item is for our friends at Langen, for their existing contract to increase it by 15,000. This is for we'll call it the last mile bit of sampling. We had anticipated, based off of the geotech reports and the topography, approximately 5,000 yards of testing, I believe, that needed to occur in a certain number of areas. Turns out that it's going to be somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000. And since the sampling needs to occur every 500 yards or so, there's a couple more samples that need to be pulled, a little bit more oversight and field work for the Langen team. So this covers those services under the rates that were negotiated previously for their contract. So just wrapping up the last bit of facility related soil that was known about. Any questions on any of that before I can screen share the motions if you like? Got them. Yeah, I stopped sharing. All right, so all of those that we just ran through, those are all outlined here in the draft motions that are in the packet.
Does anyone want to take on the big lift of reading all these, or, well, first of all, any discussion on these motions? So would anyone like to volunteer? We could break them up or do them all at once. Someone's got,
I'll give it a go.
okay, thanks, George.
So first motion is to approve CCD1 for a change to Gilbane's existing construction contract for an amount not to exceed 600,000 for soil excavation and hauling.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Sharon. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. I think that's unanimous. George, since you did that so well, would you like to continue on?
Trying to get hooked on phonics here. Motion to approve ATP1 for a change to Gilbane's existing construction contract in the amount of $5,360 for topsoil hauling to Shoreline Nursery.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
It's easier on the notes if you second them all, sir, but not that I'm suggesting you
I was
second.
planning on it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, unanimous. Third item, George, if you're up to it.
Sure. Motion to approve ATP number 2 for a change to Gilbane's existing construction contract in the amount of $60,528 for the rebidding of miscellaneous metals package BP-5B-R. This motion also contemplates the approval of Gilbane's recommendation to award to General Welding and Fabrication and attendant use of the owner's allowance within the GMP of $420,000 for Gilbane to proceed with the work and contracting with General Welding.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to approve ATP 5 for a change to Gilbane's existing construction contract in the amount of $6,033 for site contractor support work tied to soil sampling, test pits, and delineation.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Motion to approve ATP 6 for a change to Gilbane's existing construction contract in the amount of $0 for grading and drainage clarifications per the ASI and Bulletin 3.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bring us home, George.
All right. Motion to approve the additional services request dated May 2nd, 2024 for an increase of $15,000 in Langen's existing contract under PO 202-45657 for soil monitoring services on an hourly not to exceed basis.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Particularly thanks George and Sharon for taking the lead on that. So that's number 5. Moving on to number 6. Review of invoice packets.
Yes, so invoice packet, also a new first for the committee. We've got an invoice packet in the 7 figures. In terms of actual submitted documents here, invoices here, We've got CT Water, where this is for the permanent water hookup for 156,000. It's effectively an upfront cost that CT Water charges to cover their potential labor and costs as Gilbane and the subcontractors install the water line. I will note that over half of that is just labeled as contingency for CT Water. So anything unused would come back to the town. They just want to make sure that their staff are covered in case there are a ton of inspections or what have you that they need to do along the way. Eversource for the electrical transformer, it's 13,000 to actually release it, so that way they can get it ordered and we can get that on site when we need to hook up the final power. Langen's invoice for soil monitoring at 61,000. This should be, they will have additional invoices, including for this last 15,000 that's been authorized tonight. But this should be the bulk of it. I think 42,000 or so is for the soil testing themselves, the 26 odd samples that were submitted. And then finally, the first construction pay application for Gilbane, we've closed out their pre-con services. So now we're squarely into the GMP construction costs for just under 1.8 million. The bulk of that is actually not for construction put in place. It's for some of the upfront costs that are charged, namely insurance and bonding and things of that nature. So I suspect actually that the next couple should be, probably a little less than that, and then we'll ramp up increasingly as more and more work gets put in place, more trades go on board, more materials procured, etc. But it's a decently sized first pay application here for a grand total just over 2 million.
Any questions from the building committee? Oh, I did have one question. I think I mentioned if the future other people connect to the water, is that a way we can get reimbursed for our costs up front?
There is. I'll flash to it. It's not a massive amount of money, but it is baked into the agreement where. Yeah, so the CT Water will pay the town $919 if a new metered service connection to this main is established by one of the other properties.
Okay, for each connection.
For each connection, yes.
Okay, well, I would assume some people would want to connect to city water for that.
We've heard some interest already from some of the neighbors just when they found out that the water main's coming down the road a little bit. So.
I'd certainly be willing to not have to deal with my well for that. I mean, they're going to pay for their own connection to the building, their house, but beautiful. Okay, great. Just sorry for digressing, but would anyone like to read the motion? Any more questions for Adam on this, these items? We're spending real money now.
I'll read this one.
Okay.
Sharon.
Motion to approve invoice package dated 5/6/2024, including invoices from Connecticut Water, Eversource, and Langen in the amount of $231,775.41, and construction pay requisition number 1 from Gilbane in the amount of $1,795,892.75 for the total approval of $2,027,668.16.
Thank you, Sharon. Do we have a second?
Second.
Woody seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Beautiful. Unanimous. Moving on to item number 7, public comment. Phil, do we have anyone online with a hand up?
No.
Shocking.
Shocking. I guess you spent $2 million. No one cares. Moving on to number 8, remarks. Any other remarks, comments, thoughts?
Sure. I'd like to.
Okay, sure. Woody.
Just a quickie, and I know I'm a broken record, but the Pura did approve Eversource's and United Illuminating's request for dramatic increases in delivery costs on electricity, which begins on July 1st. And I think the most noteworthy thing, which I don't know if some of you are familiar with, probably Peter is, and maybe Graham, Tom Latour is our energy consultant, that he works with us and with Eversource on these things. And he sent me a kind of a recap, which is that for the first time, there's part of the delivery service for large customers, like the school will be, is a delivery charge based on kilowatt hours, not based on demand. The demand is still there. And when you go with photovoltaic systems, it's very hard to estimate what, if anything, the photovoltaic system will save on demand. It clearly saves on kilowatt hours, on usage, but not so much on demand. However, part of the delivery is now going to be kilowatt hour based, which means the photovoltaics will directly reduce that. So I just want to bring up once again, there is enormous reason at this point to seriously consider this, because our electric costs are going to become more and more onerous as we move forward. And anything we can generate on site will save us a fortune as these charges go up. So just want to make another plug for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Woody. And I believe also, I think the governor announced a program to increase the availability of funds for schools. I don't know
Yes.
if that.
Yeah.
Yep,
I've
that's
been
not yet.
watching it. I don't know if it's passed yet. I'm a little out of the loop on that. I actually
Hopefully it's
have.
not the climate bill that's going down to non-vote
Pardon me?
tomorrow or day. The
Oh, okay.
climate, the car bill, the EV car bill, if it's in that climate bill, the green monster, as some opponents called it, it might not get out of the House, but we'll see.
We'll see. It'll
Well,
certainly
that's
help
the
us.
8th, so we'll know one
Yeah.
way or the other.
But between what we get back on the IRA funds and what this will save us and just the outright cost of it really is something we have to, sharpen our pencils in other areas perhaps, but it's becoming more and more important. We have an all-electric school.
I think most people would agree with you, Woody. Thank you. Any other remarks?
Just one thing on one of the changes that Adam mentioned. I was going to interrupt him, but he was doing such a good job explaining them. I didn't want to throw him off. There was one where we took, I want to say, about 1,000 yards of pesticide impacted soil to the nursery a few towns over. That was a deal that Adam's team, Joe Luciano, his construction rep, actually brokered. So that saved at a minimum, $30,000 to $40,000, and if it went to a facility, it ended up saving about $95,000. So he just mentioned construction contacts in the team, but it was his guy that made that happen. So just wanted to give credit where credit was due. It's nice having a owner's rep that's part of the team and it's proactive in helping resolve solutions. So thank you.
I think we're all very aware Adam's above and beyond services to the committee and the community. So, but thanks for an extra shout out for Adam. I'm not sure he needs an extra shout out, but
it was more for Joe than Adam. But
I was gonna say Joe Luciano was the mastermind there, so
got it. Okay.
pass along the praise.
Kudos. Got it. Thanks. Any other remarks? I think a motion for adjournment.
Just real quick. I just want to say how exciting it is to see the construction start, all the planning that went into this and the years lead up. The groundbreaking was exciting, and seeing the foundation walls going up, it's tremendous. And thank you all for everything you're doing.
Thanks, Seth. Appreciate it. With that, do we have anyone would like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second? George, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.